Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, July 18, 2025. President Donald Trump threatens to sue the Wall Street Journal after its latest article about the president and the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, as the controversy continues at the White House and in Congress over whether and how to release the files related to that case. House joins the Senate in passing a $9 billion rescissions package in a late-night vote, sending the bill to the president to be signed into law. It would cancel funds for foreign aid and public broadcasting. President Trump signs into law the first major bill regulating digital currency. It's on the subset of cryptocurrency called stablecoins. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska flips her vote on an amendment on the relocation of the FBI headquarters, allowing, for now, the Bureau to go to the Ronald Reagan building in Washington instead of a site in Greenbelt, Maryland. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz meets U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, and a U.S. House tribute to the late former Congressman William Lacey Bill Clay Sr., founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus, who has died at the age of 94. Newsweek writes that President Donald Trump escalated his response to the Jeffrey Epstein controversy Friday, threatening legal action against the Wall Street Journal over a reported birthday letter he allegedly sent to Epstein in 2003. Trump also directed Attorney General Pam Bondi to seek the release of grand jury testimony as pressure mounts from both critics and supporters demanding transparency. The card, described as featuring typewritten text framed by a hand-drawn outline of a naked woman, was reportedly part of a birthday album compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell. That was from Newsweek. House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke this morning about the Wall Street Journal article and whether Epstein files should be released. He was on CNBC.
The president and I talked about that ridiculous allegation this morning. He said it's patently absurd. He's never drawn such a picture. He's never thought of drawing such a picture. And he said, did you see the language of this bogus supposed communication or card or something I supposedly sent to Epstein? He said, I don't talk like that. I don't think like that. They're literally making things up. And he's so frustrated by it. And he's going to wind up, I think, suing some of the media outlets that had put all this out there because they informed them that it was totally contrived. So, look, the president is the most maligned and attacked political figure in the history of American politics. There's no question about it. But he's also the most resilient. And you see at the same time his approval ratings are skyrocketing. By CNN had a story, I think, a day or two ago. He was at 90% approval rating. There's never been a president that high. So the more that they attack him, the more the American people see through it.
What could be released, and why wasn't it? Because I mean, how do you, I don't know whether you have no more information than I do, but what do you think was going on when it looked like something was going to come out then? Oh, there's nothing to release. And from a PR standpoint, that was I don't know, it wasn't great the way it was handled. Is there more to come out? Will it come out?
Are you in favor of it coming out?
I am. Look, I've been on record repeatedly. I've never seen all of the Epstein files. It's outside my lane. I mean, I'm running the House. This is over at DOJ. But what I believe in is maximum transparency, and so does President Trump. And that's what he said. He says it many different ways, many different times. But we want all credible evidence to be put out there for the American people. Reagan used to remind us to trust the American people. They're smarter than anybody gives them credit for. And I believe people can draw their own conclusions about that. But they have to have the documents. Now, at the same time, I think the interest here and the concern and, frankly, the duty, the responsibility is to protect the innocent, right? So if you have minors who are victims of sex trafficking, heaven forbid, child predatory activity, you can't have their names out there, right? So the courts and law enforcement and government agencies have a custom of protecting the innocent. You know, bogus allegations that would be made against people that can't be authenticated. You know, so that's the concern. They're trying to thread that needle because the Department of Justice does have a responsibility to make sure those people's lives are not destroyed. Imagine if their names came out on a list, immediately the media and social media would pounce on these people, and it would be lasting and permanent damage. So they've got to be very careful. But aside from that, aside from the things that would be, you know, held back from a court of law, I say put it out there, and I think the president believes the same thing.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, interviewed on CNBC this morning. President Donald Trump posting on Truth Social this morning, if there was a smoking gun on Epstein, why didn't the Dems, who controlled the files for 4 years and had Garland and Comey in charge, use it? Because they had nothing. Thursday night, the president wrote, "Based on the ridiculous amount of publicity given to Jeffrey Epstein, I have asked Attorney General Pam Bondi to produce any and all pertinent grand jury testimony subject to court approval. This scam perpetrated by the Democrats should end right now." Attorney General Bondi posting on X Thursday, "President Trump, we are ready to move the court tomorrow to unseal the grand jury transcripts." TheHill.com writes the House Rules Committee late Thursday night advanced a resolution calling for, but not legally requiring, the DOJ to release some information related to Jeffrey Epstein. As a number of Republicans expressed anger at the Trump administration's handling of the saga, the panel voted 9-4 along party lines to send the measure to the House floor, with Democrats objecting to the resolution being non-binding. That was from The Hill. The alternative put forth by the Democrats is the bipartisan resolution from Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, and Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky. Congressman Khanna spoke about that on the House floor late Thursday night during the debate on the spending cuts bill.
The American people, Republicans, independents, Democrats, want the Epstein files released with the victim's identity protected. Now, most people don't understand how this town works, so I'm going to try to explain this really simply. Congressman Massie and I introduced a bipartisan bill to release all the Epstein files and to make sure victims were protected. There are 10 Republican co-sponsors of that bill, including MAGA stalwarts like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, including Lauren Boebert, including Tim Burchett. And we have the votes tonight to pass it. But what happened is, in the Rules Committee, they don't want to have this vote tonight because they know they're going to lose, because they know their own members want to vote for it. What's even sillier is they had this non-binding resolution. So I thought, surely we would vote on a non-binding resolution. They don't even want to vote on the non-binding resolution in case Donald Trump gets slightly offended. They don't even want the vote on the non-binding resolution tonight. Now, the president is paying attention, not just because his favorite Congressman Thomas Massie is involved. He's paying attention, and he said, okay, let's release. He directs the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, let's release and ask the courts to release the grand jury testimony. Here's the problem. The grand jury testimony is largely about Epstein and Maxwell, not about all the rich and powerful men who abused, assaulted, and abandoned young women. Those people are still being protected. And by the way, the courts usually don't release grand jury testimony. But you know what? The president is hearing the American people. And the president knows that if there's a vote tonight, this body overwhelmingly would vote for the release of the files.
30 seconds.
Additional 30 seconds. I need 10 seconds. This question is, whose side are you on? Today, the Democrats are on the side of the people. The Democrats are on the side of the children. There are 10 Republicans who are on the side of the people and the children, but the entire Democratic Party is on that side, and the Republicans have chosen to protect the rich and powerful men who've abused our children. It's wrong, and that's the clear difference tonight.
Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat from California, on the House floor Thursday night. This was during debate on the rescissions bill. The House was not in session today, Friday. New York Times writes that for months, President Trump has maligned federal judges who rule against his agenda as politically motivated usurpers, referring to them as USA-hating judges and calling for their impeachment. At times, he has called into question the constitutional role of the courts as a check on the presidency. But in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, Mr. Trump has taken a different view. In this instance, according to a statement the president posted Thursday night, judges have an important role to play in deciding whether and when grand jury materials related to Mr. Epstein's indictment for sex trafficking can be released to the public. That was from the New York Times. And this is Washington Today. New York Post writes that House Republicans approved a clawback package Thursday that will cut $9 billion in previously approved federal outlays for foreign aid, NPR, and PBS. The so-called rescissions bill passed 216 to 213, with Republican members of Congress Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania and Mike Turner of Ohio joining all present Democrats in voting no. The House faced a Friday deadline to pass the measure, which the White House transmitted to Congress in June in an effort to codify cuts to wasteful spending identified by the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. The Senate passed the bill early Thursday with Senators Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, and Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, joining all 46 present Democrats in opposition. That was from the New York Post. The debate on the House floor started just before midnight Eastern Time Thursday. The vote happened into early Friday. Here's Congressman Dan Muser, Republican of Pennsylvania, speaking in support.
During President Trump's first term, we had pro-growth policies, a booming economy, and revenues increased. Then the Biden administration accelerated the deficit by those in the administration, by the way, that referred to themselves as the Politburo, who were actually running the administration. Service on the debt alone increased during that time from $400 billion in 2020 to nearly $1 trillion last year. That's why we must rein in irresponsible agencies. They've been taken over by ideologues, Mr. Speaker, doing things that are simply not in the interests of the people of the United States. USAID has done some good things, but they've also done things that were an enormous waste, totally inappropriate, and in fact, they lost the trust of the American people. Agencies like this need to be reformed. The American people aren't going to put up with it anymore. Why is the government still funding public television when most people have hundreds of channels, as has been mentioned, to watch their news or whatever they want to watch? Just because it's been around for 50 years, that's not reason enough. Unless we want to pass along $37 trillion and climbing of debt to our children, we have to start spending money on the must-haves, not on the nice-to-haves. And these stations are not only nice to have to some, they are not nice to have to most. And they are certainly not must-haves. So, Mr. Speaker, let's pass this rescission package. Let's get on our way to having some accountability for American people and codify President Trump's spending reductions into law.
Congressman Dan Muser, Republican of Pennsylvania, debating on the House floor late Thursday night. Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, opposed the cuts.
This bill will shut down rural television and radio stations, cutting off coverage of local news, eliminating emergency information like severe weather alerts, jeopardizing access to PBS Kids children's program like Sesame Street. Yes, Sesame Street. This bill rips life-saving support away from hungry, displaced, and sick people in developing countries and conflict zones, and will end programs that prevent conflict and pandemics. This bill abandons the people of Ukraine while they resist Putin's tyranny. This bill puts America last. When we retreat from the world diplomatically and through our assistance to vulnerable people, America will be alone, without allies, in a less stable world, without the support of the international community. And do you know who will come out ahead? China, Russia, Iran. And all of this is being done in the name of combating waste. I will tell you what waste is. 500 tons of food grown by American farmers destroyed at a cost of $130,000 to American taxpayers because of the chaos caused by dismantling of USAID, and it was left there to expire. This is a bill to help Republicans claim that they are practicing fiscal responsibility while concealing that what they are doing is ripping health insurance away from at least 17 million Americans in order to make billionaires even more rich. And they increase the debt by $4 trillion. How dare they talk about the deficit when they have just increased it?
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee on the House floor late Thursday, just after midnight, before the House passed this bill, 216 to 213, agreeing to the Senate changes to the $9 billion rescissions bill. And it now heads to President Trump, who posted Thursday night in all caps, House approves $9 billion cuts package, including atrocious NPR and public broadcasting, where billions of dollars a year were wasted. Republicans have tried doing this for 40 years and failed, but no more. This is big. President Trump today signed the first significant federal law on cryptocurrency. It's on stablecoins. The bill passed the House and Senate with bipartisan support. ABC News writes that stablecoins are cryptocurrency that have their value tied to a stable asset like the U.S. dollar. The Genius Act, as it's called, makes it easier for banks and other entities to issue these coins and is expected to increase public trust in the assets and growing the industry overall. Traditionally, buyers use their personal bank accounts to buy a stablecoin and then use the stablecoin to trade for some other kind of more volatile crypto, such as Bitcoin or something else. That was from the ABC News article. ABC also writes that cryptocurrency is a business that President Trump's family has begun forging strong ties to and has promoted in recent years. President Trump signed this bill into law at the White House.
Just as I promised last year, the Genius Act creates a clear and simple regulatory framework to establish and unleash the immense promise of dollar-backed stable coins. This could be perhaps the greatest revolution in financial technology since the birth of the Internet itself. A lot of people are saying that. I don't know. What do you guys think? Yes? If you say yes, I'm saying yes. I think it's great that you're involved, I will tell you. Many Americans are unaware that behind the scenes, the technical backbone of the financial system is decades out of date, many, many years out of date. You know that. Paul and others are straightening it out, but payments and money transfers are costly and take days or even weeks to clear. Under this bill, the entire ancient system will be eligible for a 21st century upgrade using the state-of-the-art crypto technology. Who would have thought we would have been saying that 2 years after I really met you for the first time? The Genius Act provides banks, businesses, and financial institutions a framework for issuing crypto assets backed one-for-one with real U.S. dollars, treasury bills, and other cash equivalents. It's really strengthening the dollar and giving the dollar great prominence. And, you know, you have this little group called BRICS. It's fading out fast. But BRICS is, they wanted to try and take over the dollar, the dominance of the dollar, and the standard of the dollar. And I said, anybody that's in the BRICS consortium of nations, we're going to tariff you 10%. And they had a meeting the following day, and almost nobody showed up. They said, leave me alone. They didn't want to be tariffed, did they, Howard? So it's amazing. No, we're not going to let the dollar slide. If we have a smart president, you're never going to let the dollar slide. If you have a dummy, that could happen. Like the last one, he would, if you ever asked him about the dollar sliding, he would have no idea. But we can't let that ever happen again. Consumers, vendors, and people all over the world will then be able to use those stable coins for ultra-low-cost transactions that are cleared and settled in a matter of seconds rather than weeks and months. And it's really an amazing thing. And with the privacy, flexibility, and decentralization of cash, this revolution has the potential to supercharge American economic growth and empower billions of people to save and transfer in U.S. dollars. It's really all backed by the dollars. It's really a great thing. And a lot of, we had a lot of Democrat support. I have to tell you that. I was shocked anytime you get one but we had a tremendous amount of Democrat support, which we appreciate, and which just shows you that you're doing the right thing.
President Donald Trump in the White House East Room signing into law this bill to regulate the digital asset called stablecoins. Quartz news site writes the crypto market just hit a massive milestone. Total market capitalization has crossed $4 trillion for the first time ever. The record-breaking moment comes on the heels of a strong altcoin rally and a wave of regulatory momentum out of Washington. Developments could mark the start of a new era for digital assets. That was from Quartz. Wall Street today, the Dow down 142, NASDAQ up 10, S&P down a fraction. White House border czar Tom Homan begins a Washington Times article, flatly ruled out any amnesty for illegal immigrants as part of President Trump's plans and said he won't accept an amnesty bill from Congress either. Speaking to reporters at the White House, Mr. Homan said he wanted to tamp down on news coverage suggesting Mr. Trump is eyeing leniency for migrants who work on farms or in service jobs. His comments come as Trump administration has sown confusion over the president's approach to illegal immigrants in the interior of the U.S. Facing complaints from businesses worried about losing their migrant workforce, particularly in the agriculture and hospitality industries, the president has promised some leniency. That was from the Washington Times article. Here's Tom Homan outside the White House.
When do you expect the president to actually announce the specifics of the exemptions for deportations for farm workers?
Look, there's discussions going on. I'm not going to get ahead of the president on that. But I will say this, because I've read a lot of news stories that are inaccurate. There will be no amnesty. There are people talking about, we talk about policies every day, strategies every day. That is one of the discussions. Not getting ahead of the president, we'll see what happens.
Are you concerned about the amnesty provisions in Congressman Salazar's bill?
There will be no, the president will not approve any amnesty.
Proposals similar to Alligator Alcatraz. Which states and how many are you getting?
We don't have an agreement yet, so I'm not giving anybody any credit until we got an agreement.
What's happening with golden cards? President announced a few months ago.
Out of my lane, I'm the border czar.
Okay. Can you explain how on border wall construction, which regions are seeing that restart, and also how much border wall and how quickly is this moving? Any updates that you have on that?
No, I know CBP. I talked to CBP this morning. They have a plan. They got a prioritization where they're putting border barriers up based on where they see the biggest need. Wall is being constructed. More water buoys are being put in the water, but that plan is being put together now based on the big beautiful bill, knowing they have the money available. They're reinstituting that plan, so I don't have the most recent facts on that.
Specifically, that funding is going to where you're tracking the border wall?
No.
Can you on third country agreements? Which countries reach these deals with?
We have a conversation with a lot of countries, but until we get an agreement, I'm not going to comment who they are.
Border czar Tom Homan speaking to reporters in the White House driveway. Story from Reuters, El Salvador's government will send detained Venezuelans to Caracas in exchange for Americans held in Venezuela, 2 U.S. government officials told Reuters on Friday. One of the officials said El Salvador would send 238 Venezuelans held in its maximum security Sicat prison to Caracas, and that the Venezuelan government would release 5 U.S. citizens and 5 U.S. permanent residents to American custody. Again, from Reuters. Story from Government Executive. The Senate Appropriations Committee removed language from one of its annual government funding bills Thursday that would have prevented the Trump administration from relocating the FBI's headquarters anywhere other than a previously selected location in a Maryland suburb outside Washington, D.C. The change, of course, came 1 week after the committee voted to adopt an amendment from Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, that would have blocked the FBI from moving to the Ronald Reagan building, which sits a few blocks away from the agency's crumbling D.C. headquarters. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, had voted with the committee's Democrats to approve the amendment, citing security concerns, but flipped to oppose it after speaking with FBI Director Kash Patel. That was from Government Executive. The committee meeting Thursday had Senator Murkowski explaining she changed her vote on the amendment because it threatened the entire spending bill covering commerce, justice, and science, since all the Republicans said they would vote no on the bill if that amendment was included. She also said she got assurances from the FBI director on the Bureau's decision about its headquarters.
I did have an opportunity to have a good conversation with the director of the FBI. And I was joined by the chairman and the chairman of the subcommittee in that meeting. And I came away with a satisfaction that my questions had been answered. I still have reservations about the move, I'll be frank with you, but I don't believe that we should lock the FBI into the Greenbelt location, which that amendment would do. I don't think that there's any disagreement. If any of us have seen the Hoover building, there's no disagreement that it's not a situation that needs to be left standing for another decade, much less 2 decades. I'm told that if we wait another 10 years for new location, what's going to happen is we're going to be spending more money putting Band-Aids on the old facility only for that building to be sold and demolished. That's not a good outcome. That, to me, is throwing good money after bad. There's history, as Senator Van Hollen has noted. Some of it is just plain old site evaluation. Some of it is a little bit of political intrigue. I have no interest in going down that rabbit hole. But I asked the question, well, what happened after 2023 when the decision was made to go to the Greenbelt property? And we heard the concerns there expressed by Director Wray at the time about the potential for conflicts of interest. So there's a lot out there that is worthy of exploration. The process isn't perfect. I'm not convinced that we've got enough information to know that ultimately the Ronald Reagan building is going to be the best location.
Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, at the Appropriations Committee meeting on Thursday. Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, also spoke. He was the one who offered the amendment to keep the FBI headquarters moved to Greenbelt, Maryland, rather than the Trump administration's new site of the Reagan building. That amendment passed last week, and on Thursday it was reversed after Senator Murkowski switched her vote.
A bipartisan amendment that was adopted is now being proposed to be stripped out in what I agree with Senator Moran and all our checking is an unprecedented way. And I want to underscore the fact that my original amendment with respect to the funds that have been set aside to build the FBI at a site that was selected was not just about Maryland and Van Hollen. This was actually a bipartisan process over many years. And what happened was the Trump administration came in and they proposed a de facto rescission of the funds. This is exactly what we were talking about last night in a different form, because those monies had been set aside for the purpose, not of going to Maryland, but of going to the site that was selected through a nonpartisan process of experts that would meet the security requirements of the men and women of the FBI and the mission requirements of the FBI. This has been a long bipartisan process. And so when we got the request for reprogramming from the FBI, I had hoped that we would, on a bipartisan basis, say, no, we're not going to accept your reprogramming request because it flies in the face of longstanding bipartisan support for this process. We did not do that. And so I offered the amendment to make sure that we defend that process. And Madam Chair, I do want to just take a moment for our colleagues to emphasize again the bipartisan nature of this decision over many years, because this battle is not going away. You know, as the chairman said, it became a partisan vote, but it was only a partisan vote because the Republican side of the committee decided to vote no after a bipartisan amendment was adopted.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, at the Appropriations Committee meeting on Thursday on the spending bill for Commerce, Science, and Justice. A story from The Guardian. President Trump signed an executive order on Thursday creating a new classification of federal employees who would be subject to hiring and firing by the president, Schedule G, for employees working on policy. In the latest action by his administration to reshape the federal workforce, the non-career classified employees who will be expected to leave in changing presidential administrations, with the order claiming it will improve operations, particularly in agencies like the Department of Veterans Affairs, by streamlining appointments for key policy roles. The order did not cite how many employees would fall under the new classification. That was from Guardian. Washington Today continues in a moment.
In a nation divided, a rare moment of unity. This fall, C-SPAN presents Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. In a town where partisan fighting prevails. One table, two leaders, one goal, to find common ground. This fall, Ceasefire, on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. From Axios, the director of Israel's Mossad spy agency visited Washington this week, seeking U.S. help in convincing countries to take hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza. Two sources with knowledge of the issue tell Axios The spy chief told White House envoy Steve Witkoff that Israel has been speaking in particular with Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Libya. The Israeli government's goal of removing much of Gaza's population is hugely controversial. That was from Axios. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, was at the Pentagon today for a meeting with U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. They both made statements to the press.
On behalf of our team, we want to congratulate you on an incredibly successful Rising Lion and 12-day war that changed the region and the world, and was an example of why Israel is a model ally, as understands the threat, is capable, and will act in defense of your own country, but also recognizing the collective security threats that we face. So I want to commend, the chairman and I, all of us had a chance to watch in real time what you are capable of, and we're grateful. And of course, our portion in Operation Midnight Hammer, which demonstrated the capabilities of the United States military. And of course, those 3 nuclear sites in Iran, which were obliterated in case our press can't figure that out, which they seem to not be able to do. And the more we report and the more we see, the more we understand how devastating those attacks were on all 3 of those nuclear sites. But it was not just a message to those nuclear sites, but also to the rest of the world. Of America could fly 37 hours undetected into a hostile nation, deliver decisive, precise munitions that only the United States of America is capable of employing, and then go home safely. That's a message to the world, and we did, ultimately, what you did and what we did remade the region, created incredible opportunities. We believe, eventually, should Iran make the choice for peace. That's ultimately the hope of your country and the hope of ours. So we stand firmly with Israel, committed to reinforcing your right to self-defense. And whether it's new capabilities, that defense, or lasting peace, we look forward to working together even more. So, Mr. Minister, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your kind hospitality. I would like to express just how much I'm impressed with Operation Midnight Hammer. It was a brave and historic decision by President Trump. Together, we destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. We destroyed the Iranian nuclear program.
You can say that a third time for the press if you want.
I tell it for everyone. It's very clear. We targeted enrichment sites, nuclear scientists, and other targets related to the nuclear program. We also destroyed Iran's missile production capability. Our joint goal is to keep our achievements, stopping Iran from building its nuclear program and mass production of missiles. We have a very close partnership, and we will continue to strengthen it in the fields of missile defense and drones. I would like to thank you again for playing a key role in the partnership and friendship between the United States and Israel. Your hospitality during my visit here is an example of it. Thank you very much to you, to the President, and to all that did the great common operation. And first of all, for, as I said, for President Trump, for the brave and historical decision. Thank you very much.
Excellent. And thank you very much. Look forward to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the press. Thank you.
Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz and U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, making statements but answering no reporters' questions. ABC News writes that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Pope Leo XIV on Friday after Israel's deadly attack on the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza that killed 3 people and wounded 10 others, according to the Vatican. Vatican said in a statement to ABC News, during the meeting, the Holy Father renewed his appeals for renewed impetus to negotiations and for a ceasefire and an end to the war. He reiterated his concern for the dramatic humanitarian situation of the population in Gaza, whose excruciating price is being paid, especially by children, the elderly, and the sick. The Holy Father reiterated the urgency of protecting places of worship and, above all, the faithful and all people in Palestine and Israel. That, according to the Vatican. In a statement Thursday, Israel said it deeply regrets the strike on the only Catholic church in Gaza, attributing it to stray ammunition. Reporting from ABC News. The situation in the Middle East was one topic today when two U.S. senators, Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, and Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, took part in the Aspen Security Forum in Aspen, Colorado. The moderator, Peter Baker of the New York Times, at one point asking if the two senators saw any foreign policy successes from President Trump. Senator Coons will answer first.
You all have a lot of criticism of President Trump and his administration. You're the opposition party. It's your job to, and I know it's genuinely felt. But foreign policy and national security has often been one of the areas where there has been bipartisan consensus, at least on some areas, on some broad goals, even if not on tactics. Is there anything in the 6 months of the Trump second term on foreign policy or national security that you agree with him on, that you think he's done a good job, that you support him on?
Look, I'll say in the first Trump administration, getting NAFTA updated through the USMCA, which was a bipartisan effort and a bipartisan product, that was a significant step forward in terms of our economic and regional integration. And the Abraham Accords, avoiding the annexation of the West Bank and instead moving ahead some of the normalization in the region, was a really positive step. I am struck that USMCA is now almost completely undone by the tariff fight. The strike on Iran is one that I disagreed with because of the process, the lack of consultation with Congress, the partisan way that Republicans were notified at the most senior levels, Democrats were not. And I frankly did not believe that we'd end up in the period we seem to be in, where a counterstrike by Iran against American soldiers and interests has not yet come. If it actually ends up securing a movement towards regional peace and really knocking down Iran's nuclear enrichment program, it's a good thing. I mean, having Iran on its back foot and having the Iranian enrichment progress halted is something I'm not going to criticize. My concern is the lack of a clear path forward. His engagement right now with Bibi Netanyahu to press him to end the war in Gaza and to find some path towards Saudi, Israeli, Palestinian reconciliation and recognition is a positive. My core concern is how unreliable and uneven he is. As I just said in my first comment, he'll spend a week praising Putin and terrorizing Zelensky, and then a week praising Zelensky and criticizing Putin. That unpredictability, that sort of madman theory of leadership where nobody knows what he's going to do next, is profoundly destabilizing to our alliances, to our values, to how the world views us and sees us. So I did manage to find my way back around to criticizing him.
I noticed that.
Let me look. And this actually started the last 3 months of Biden, but the fact that we don't have the number of crossings at the border is significant. But you can be for border security and be absolutely against masked ICE agents picking up people when they drop their kids off for daycare, or somebody going and paying a parking ticket. And the outrageousness of this implementation, and one of the things with this giant plus up on ICE, ICE now has a much larger budget than the FBI. And if you look at the ratio, and I've been trying to get these numbers, and it is many, many times, I can't give you the exact number because the number on what we do on counterintelligence is still classified, but it is tens of times more that we are spending on picking up people in America than we are spending on counterespionage. To the other couple points, and that to me, I don't know in what world that's a rational policy choice. I would also grant on the Iran strike, I had the same concerns and I was Gang of 8 and did not get told. But the fact, again, this is where in his effort to claim total credit, he turned something that was a success, but by saying within 2 hours, total obliteration, when we didn't even try to fully take out all the enriched uranium sites, set a standard that was too high. Setting Iran back dramatically was important. But then you had everybody trying to kowtow to this level that candidly is unobtainable unless you had troops on the ground. And I would echo again, the only way we will know on Iran is when, and I thought this is where I hope the president was headed, which was to re-engage and get inspectors back on the ground. It feels like that moment has already passed. The other thing, and I thought you would have completely grabbed the easy takeaway, thank you for leaving me a little crumb, the fact that NATO is dramatically increasing the defense budget, that is extraordinarily, that is a success, but it's got to be tempered by the break in trust. The challenge that I think President Trump has, and I think it's reflective of his business career, he does not, it appears that he does not view that there's any value in long-term relationships. Everything is a short-term transaction. You have to win the moment. And winning the moment when we're thinking about a geopolitical world where our strength has been military, economic, soft power, and values, so many of those things are undermined, and that even with the short-term increase in the defense spending, I do worry that the long-term trust.
Senator Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, and Senator Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, at the Aspen Security Forum in Aspen, Colorado. The moderator, Peter Baker, New York Times White House correspondent. A story from Roll Call. Former Congressman William Lacey Clay Jr., a St. Louis power broker who became Missouri's first elected black member of Congress and went on to serve 16 terms in the House, died Wednesday at the age of 94. First elected in 1968, the Democrat was succeeded in the House by his son, former Congressman William Lacey Clay Jr., who himself served for 10 years. That was from Roll Call. Late Thursday night on the House floor, after debate and votes on the bills were finished, Congressman Wesley Bell and Emanuel Cleaver, both Democrats of Missouri, paid tribute to Clay, surrounded by the state's bipartisan congressional delegation.
Today, our country lost a true trailblazer. Congressman William Clay passed away after a lifetime of service that reshaped St. Louis and our nation. Already a civil rights icon before he was elected, he didn't come to Washington to play politics. He came to fight for working people, black families, union members, and those too often left out and unheard. He carried their voices into this chamber and made sure they echoed. Bill Clay was a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus. I, so many others, would not be here without the doors he opened and the example he set. I yield to Reverend Cleaver.
As I sat on the bed this morning trying to get up, I received a phone call to tell me that Congressman Bill Clay had just passed. And I sat there for a few minutes feeling sad. And then it occurred to me that death is not the greatest loss in life. The greatest loss in life is to die with your life not lived and still inside you. Bill Clay did not die with hope for his country inside him. He did not die with his brilliant writing inside him. He did not die with creativity. And alas, Bill Clay did not die without working every day he walked into this place for the people of St. Louis.
I'm holding his son, my friend and predecessor, Lacey Clay, the entire Clay family, and the St. Louis community in my prayers. I ask that on behalf of myself, the entire CBC, which he helped found, the Missouri delegation, I ask for a moment of silence in memory of the Honorable William Lacey Clay, Sr.
Congressmen Wesley Bell and Emanuel Cleaver, Democrats of Missouri, leading that tribute to the late Congressman William Lacey Bill Clay, Sr., Thursday night, after news that Clay had passed away. In 1992, Bill Clay Sr. was on C-SPAN to discuss his new book, Just Permanent Interests, Black Americans in Congress, 1870 to 1991.
I might say that I wrote this book in hope of familiarizing the newly elected black officials with the occupational hazards associated with full-time careers in the field of politics. And I wrote it in hope of, with the expectation of educating those political science majors who are preparing to pursue a life in government. Maybe this book will become a handbook or a guide or even a Bible that will encourage and guide those who pursue this endeavor. We would like for them to understand that we have interests that are unique to us. And one of the problems and one of the reasons for such a book such as this is to impress on them that we should never lose our basic interests. Because one of our problems is that we get more concerned about other people's interests that we lose sight of our own. Now, we can have a coalition with environmentalists, and with consumers, and with organized labor. But running through all of that is a strand that says we're black, and that's our primary interest. And until we live in a society that's colorblind, it will remain our primary interest. So the title of this book comes from the motto of the Congressional Black Caucus, which says that black people have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests.
Then Congressman Bill Clay Sr., Democrat from Missouri, on C-SPAN in 1992 on his book, Just Permanent Interests, Black Americans in Congress, 1870 to 1991, from C-SPAN's video library at cspan.org. Bill Clay Sr. has died at the age of 94. NAACP putting out a statement on X. As Missouri's first black congressman and a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Clay fearlessly brought the spirit of the civil rights movement to Washington. Serving his St. Louis community for over 3 decades, we honor his tireless efforts to open doors of opportunity, elevate marginalized voices, and advance justice for all. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.